Admiral Zephyx stood on the bridge of the flagship Dominion's Edge, watching the blue-green marble that humans called Earth grow larger in the viewscreen. The planet looked so peaceful from this distance, almost innocent. White clouds swirled over vast oceans, and the night side sparkled with city lights like scattered diamonds. It was hard to believe this small world had caused so much trouble for the mighty Kytherian Empire. "Admiral, we're receiving another transmission from the human planet," reported Communications Officer Vellner, her forearms working efficiently across her control panel. "Same message as before." Zephyx's scaled face showed mild amusement. "Let me hear it again." The bridge speakers crackled to life with a calm, human voice speaking in the standard galactic language. "This is Earth Defense Command. We are issuing our final warning to the approaching Kytherian fleet. Turn back now. We do not wish to engage in hostilities, but we will defend ourselves if attacked. This is your last chance to avoid unnecessary bloodshed." Several officers on the bridge chittered in amusement. The idea that a single planet could threaten their massive fleet was laughable. The Kytherian Empire had conquered over 300 worlds in the past century. Their fleet consisted of 200 warships, each one larger than any vessel the humans had ever built. "Shall I respond, Admiral?" asked Vellner. Zephyx waved a dismissive claw. "No point. They'll understand our response soon enough." He turned to his tactical officer. "Status report on the human defenses." Captain Thorek, a massive reptilian warrior with ceremonial scars covering his arms, pulled up a holographic display. "Our scouts confirm minimal orbital defenses. 37 small space stations armed with primitive kinetic weapons. Maybe 50 patrol ships, none larger than our escorts. Their ground-based installations appear to be energy weapons of limited range." "What about their fleet?" "Intelligence suggests they have approximately 200 military vessels scattered across their system. Most are exploratory ships they've converted for combat. Nothing that poses a real threat to our battle cruisers." Zephyx nodded with satisfaction. This would be easier than their last conquest. The Andromedan resistance had at least possessed energy shields and antimatter weapons. These humans still relied heavily on chemical propulsion and metal projectiles. "Admiral," interrupted Science Officer Graith, her tentacles dancing nervously over her instruments. "I'm detecting some unusual energy signatures from the planet's surface." "Define unusual." "Large-scale electromagnetic activity concentrated in several locations. The patterns don't match their known technology profiles." Zephyx studied the data streaming across his personal display. The readings were indeed strange, but they could mean anything. Perhaps the humans were powering up their planetary defense grid. It wouldn't matter. Their weapons were centuries behind Kytherian technology. "Maintain course," he ordered. "All ships prepare for orbital bombardment. We'll give them one demonstration of our power. If they surrender immediately, we might allow some of them to live as slaves." The Kytherian fleet moved into attack formation. 200 vessels arranged themselves in a perfect sphere around Earth, their weapon systems charged and ready. Each ship bristled with plasma cannons, particle beams, and antimatter torpedoes. The combined firepower could crack a planet's crust if necessary. On Earth, President Sarah Chun stood in the Situation Room deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. The room buzzed with activity as military officers coordinated with defense installations around the globe. Giant screens displayed the positions of every Kytherian ship, tracked by quantum sensors that the aliens didn't know existed. "Madam President," said General Morrison, "we're receiving final confirmation from all sites. Project Prometheus is fully operational." Chun nodded grimly. She had hoped it wouldn't come to this. Humanity had spent 50 years preparing for this moment, ever since first contact with the galactic community had revealed the true nature of the universe. Most species were peaceful traders and explorers, but empires like the Kytherians saw younger civilizations as resources to be harvested. "How long since our last warning?" she asked. 18 minutes, ma'am." No response from their fleet. "Then, they've made their choice." Chun turned to the communications officer. "Send the activation code to all Prometheus sites. Authorization is Alpha 77 Charlie." Across Earth, massive installations buried deep underground received the signal. These facilities had been built in secret over decades, hidden beneath cities, mountains, and ocean floors. Each one contained technology that had taken humanity's greatest minds 50 years to develop and perfect. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the primary control room of Site Alpha, located 3 miles beneath the Nevada desert. Around her, hundreds of technicians made final preparations at their stations. The chamber stretched out like a vast cathedral, filled with machinery that hummed with barely contained power. Prometheus Alpha ready for activation, she reported into her communicator. All safety protocols confirmed. Quantum field generators are stable. Similar reports came in from 49 other sites around the world. Each installation represented decades of research, trillions of dollars, and the combined efforts of every nation on Earth. When the Kytherians had first announced their intention to incorporate humanity into their empire, every government had put aside their differences to fund the Prometheus project. Admiral Zephyx watched his tactical display with satisfaction. His fleet was in perfect position. The humans had gone silent, probably paralyzed with fear as they realized the hopelessness of their situation. "Admiral," called out his sensor operator, "I'm reading massive power buildups across the planet's surface. Energy levels are off the charts. Probably their last desperate attempt at resistance. Lock weapons on their major population centers. We'll start with 3 cities as a demonstration." "Yes, sir." Targeting New York, London, and Tokyo. Zephyx allowed himself a moment of pride. The Kytherian Empire would add another world to its collection today. The humans would make decent laborers once their spirit was broken. Their primitive technology might even provide some interesting curiosities for the Imperial Museum. "All ships report ready, Admiral." "Very well. Commence bombardment in 30 seconds. Dr. Vasquez watched the countdown timer on her screen reach 0. Prometheus Alpha, initiating quantum field collapse. Her finger hovered over the activation switch. 50 years of preparation came down to this single moment. The switch clicked. Deep underground, massive generators roared to life. Quantum field manipulators, each one the size of a skyscraper, began their deadly work. The technology was based on principles that most galactic civilizations considered theoretical impossibilities. Humanity had made them reality. On the surface, nothing visible happened. No bright lights or explosions marked the moment that changed everything. The effect was far more subtle and infinitely more devastating. Admiral Zephyx was reviewing the targeting data when his science officer screamed, "Admiral, massive spatial distortion. Something's happening to local space-time." Before Zephyx could respond, the view screen erupted in chaos. Stars began moving in impossible directions. The neat formation of his fleet scattered as ships tumbled through suddenly twisted space. Warning alarms shrieked as gravitational forces pulled vessels in directions that had no names. "What's happening?" Zephyx roared, gripping his command chair as the flagship shuddered. "Space itself is warping around the planet. Gravitational fields are fluctuating wildly. I'm reading impossible energy levels. On Earth, 50 Prometheus installations worked in perfect synchronization. Each site generated a localized collapse of quantum fields, creating controllable gravitational anomalies. Alone, each installation could bend space-time in a small area. Together, they could reshape the fabric of reality around an entire planet. The Kytherian fleet found itself trapped in a maze of twisted space. Ships that had been kilometers apart suddenly collided as distance became meaningless. Others were stretched across light years as they fell into artificial gravity wells. The careful formation that had taken hours to arrange dissolved into chaos in seconds. Captain Thorek watched his sensor readings with disbelief. "Admiral, it's impossible. They're manipulating gravitational fields on a planetary scale. How is this possible?" Zephyx had no answer. His tactical display showed his fleet scattered across several star systems, with many ships simply gone. The humans had done something that violated every law of physics he understood. "Emergency jump," he ordered. "All ships retreat immediately." "We can't, sir. The spatial distortions are interfering with our jump drives. We're trapped." Dr. Vasquez monitored the effect from her control room. The Prometheus network was performing exactly as designed. Gravity waves rippled out from Earth in carefully calculated patterns, creating a zone of controlled chaos that extended far beyond the planet's normal gravitational influence. "Prometheus control to all sites," she announced. "Phase 1 complete. initiating Phase 2 protocols. The second phase was even more devastating than the first. While the initial gravitational pulse had scattered the enemy fleet, the follow-up wave was designed for destruction. Artificial gravity wells opened and closed in rapid succession, creating forces that no ship's hull could withstand. Kytherian vessels, each one a masterpiece of engineering, crumpled like paper bags. The gravitational stress exceeded their structural limits by orders of magnitude. Battleships that had survived centuries of warfare were crushed in seconds. Admiral Zephyx watched in horror as his flagship's hull began to buckle. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut as sections of the ship were crushed or torn away. His crew fought desperately to maintain life support as the artificial gravity fields tore their vessel apart. "Damage report," he shouted over the sound of groaning metal. "Hull breach on decks 7 through 15. We've lost main power. Emergency systems failing." Through the chaos, Zephyx could see other ships in his fleet suffering the same fate. The mighty Kytherian armada, pride of the Empire, was being destroyed by forces they couldn't even fight against. On Earth, President Chen watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. Each blinking that disappeared represented a Kytherian warship eliminated. The invasion fleet that had seemed so overwhelming an hour ago was already reduced to scattered debris. "Madam President," reported General Morrison, "enemy fleet effectiveness is down by 60% and falling. Remaining ships appear to be attempting retreat. Maintain Prometheus field integrity," Chen ordered. "Don't let any of them escape." Dr. Vasquez adjusted the field parameters from her control station. The Prometheus network could generate dozens of different gravitational effects, from subtle course adjustments to reality-tearing catastrophes. She selected a containment pattern that would prevent any surviving ships from reaching safe jump distance. The remaining Kytherian vessels found themselves trapped in a gravitational maze with no exit. Every direction they turned led to another deadly anomaly. Space itself had become their enemy, controlled by a species they had dismissed as primitives. Admiral Zephyx's flagship Dominion's Edge was one of the few ships still intact, though barely. Half his crew was dead, and the ship was held together mainly by emergency force fields. Around him, the last remnants of his mighty fleet faced the same fate. "Sir," called out his communications officer, her voice weak from injuries, "we're receiving a transmission from the human planet." "Put it through." The view screen flickered to life, showing a human woman in military uniform. Behind her stood others of her species, their expressions cold and determined. "This is Admiral Sarah Chun of Earth Defense Command," the woman said calmly. "You were warned. You chose not to listen. Your invasion fleet has been neutralized. You have one chance to survive this encounter." Zephyx struggled to speak through his shock and pain. What do you want?" "Surrender immediately. Power down all weapons and prepare to be boarded. Any hostile action will result in your complete destruction." The Kytherian admiral looked around his ruined bridge. His mighty empire's greatest fleet had been destroyed in less than an hour by a species using technology he didn't understand. His officers stared at him, waiting for orders that could mean life or death. "How?" he whispered. Admiral Chin's expression didn't change. "You underestimated us. That was your first and final mistake." The view screen went dark, leaving Zephyx alone with the impossible reality of his defeat. Around Earth, the twisted remains of 200 Kytherian warships drifted helplessly in the gravitational web that humans had woven around their world. 50 sites across Earth continued their deadly work, maintaining the field that had turned the tables on an empire. The installations hummed with power, ready to adjust their output at a moment's notice. Humanity had revealed just a fraction of their true capabilities. The warning had been ignored. The consequences were absolute. Admiral Zephyx's hands shook as he stared at the tactical display showing the wreckage of his fleet. Of the 200 ships that had arrived at Earth, only 23 remained even partially functional. The rest had been crushed, torn apart, or simply vanished into the gravitational anomalies surrounding the human homeworld. His communications officer, her face marked with cuts from flying debris, looked up from her station. "Admiral, the humans are transmitting boarding instructions. They want us to dock with their space stations." "Our ships can barely maintain life support," Zephyx replied bitterly. "How do they expect us to maneuver?" His answer came immediately. The gravitational fields around his ship shifted, and the Dominion's edge began moving toward one of Earth's orbital stations without any input from its crew. The humans weren't just controlling gravity around their planet. They were using it to move his ships like toys. Captain Thorek limped onto the bridge, his left arm in a makeshift sling. "Admiral, engineering reports that our quantum drives are completely offline. Whatever the humans did, it damaged our ships at the fundamental level." Through the viewscreen, Zephyx watched a small human vessel approach. It was sleek and silver, moving with perfect precision despite the chaotic gravitational fields. As it drew closer, he could see it was unmarked except for a simple designation: Transport 7. The human ship docked with his flagship's emergency airlock. Zephyx gathered his remaining senior officers in the damaged conference room. They were a pitiful sight, wounded, exhausted, and thoroughly defeated. These same officers had celebrated their victories over dozens of worlds. Now they faced the humiliation of surrender. "Whatever happens," Zephyx told them, "remember your duty to the Empire. These humans may have superior technology, but they're still a primitive species. We will endure." The airlock cycled, and 6 humans in powered armor entered the ship. Their equipment looked advanced, but not impossibly so. What struck Zephyx was their behavior. They moved with military precision, but showed no hostility toward the Kytherian crew. The lead human removed his helmet, revealing a middle-aged man with graying hair and calm eyes. "I'm Colonel Harrison, Earth Defense Corps. I'm here to escort you and your senior staff to a meeting with our command." Zephyx had expected arrogance or cruelty from his captors, but the human spoke with simple professionalism. "We are prisoners of war." "That depends on you," Harrison replied. "Our governments want to talk before making any permanent decisions." The transport ship was larger inside than it appeared, with comfortable seating arranged around a central meeting area. As they traveled toward Earth's primary orbital station, Zephyx studied his captors. The humans seemed confident, but not bloodthirsty. They offered food and medical attention to the wounded Kytherian officers. "Colonel," Zephyx finally asked, "how did your people develop gravitational manipulation technology? Our scientists consider such abilities impossible." Harrison exchanged glances with his team members. "That's not really my area of expertise, Admiral. I'm sure our scientists will be happy to discuss it with yours." Earth's primary orbital station was massive, easily 10 times larger than anything the Kytherian Empire had built. As their transport approached, Zephyx counted dozens of docking bays, weapon emplacements, and sensor arrays. The station alone could probably defend against a small fleet. Inside the station, human personnel went about their duties with the same calm efficiency he'd observed in the transport crew. There was no celebration of victory, no mocking of the defeated aliens. The humans treated this devastating battle as just another day's work. They were escorted to a large conference room where President Chun waited along with several military officers and scientists. The human leader gestured to chairs sized for Kytherian physiology. "Admiral Zephyx," President Chun began, "you have 2 choices. You can cooperate with us, or you can be sent back to your empire as a warning to others." "Sent back." Zephyx couldn't hide his confusion. "You're not planning to execute us? Why would we? Your attack failed. Your fleet is destroyed. You pose no further threat." Chen's voice remained matter-of-fact. "However, we want to make sure this situation doesn't repeat itself." General Morrison, a tall human with intelligent eyes, leaned forward. "Admiral, how many worlds has your empire conquered?" 317, Zephyx answered automatically, then wondered why he was being so forthcoming. "And how many of those worlds had the technology to defend themselves?" Zephyx considered the question. "None. They were all primitive civilizations." "Exactly. Your empire has grown by bullying weaker species. You've never faced an equal opponent, let alone a superior one." Dr. Elena Vasquez, the scientist who had overseen the Prometheus project, activated a holographic display. It showed a 3-dimensional map of local space, with hundreds of star systems marked in different colors. "Admiral, this represents the current military situation in our galactic region," she explained. "Red systems are controlled by aggressive empires like yours. Yellow systems are neutral, but vulnerable. Green systems have sufficient defenses to protect themselves." Zephyx studied the map. The vast majority of systems were colored red or yellow. Only a handful showed green. His empire controlled more territory than any other single faction. Now watch this, Dr. Vasquez said, adjusting the display parameters. The map transformed. Earth appeared at the center, surrounded by rapidly expanding green zones. The effect spread outward like ripples in a pond, turning yellow systems green and even affecting some red territories. What does this represent? Zephyx asked. The systems that will receive Prometheus technology within the next 5 years, President Chen answered. We're going to arm every peaceful civilization in this galactic region with the ability to defend itself. The implications hit Zephyx like a physical blow. If the humans shared their gravitational manipulation technology, his empire would no longer be able to conquer defenseless worlds. Worse, planets they had already subjugated might rebel with their new defensive capabilities. You can't do that, he protested. The galactic balance of power is about to change dramatically, General Morrison interrupted. For too long, peaceful species have lived in fear of empires like yours. That era is ending. Captain Thorek leaned forward. Humans, you don't understand what you're proposing. There are empires far more powerful than ours. The Nexary Dominion alone controls over 1,000 systems. If you threaten the established order, they will unite against you. Dr. Vasquez smiled, and something in her expression made Zephyx nervous. Captain, you're assuming that our gravitational manipulation is the extent of our defensive capabilities. She activated another display, this one showing technical specifications that made no sense to Zephyx. The mathematics involved concepts his people had never discovered. The energy requirements seemed to violate physical laws. Admiral, President Chun said, your empire has existed for 8 centuries. In that time, you've conquered hundreds of worlds and enslaved billions of beings. How long do you think it took us to develop the technology that destroyed your fleet? Zephyx calculated quickly. 50 years? Maybe 100. 12 years. The silence that followed was deafening. Zephyx felt his worldview crumbling. Impossible. 12 years from the first theoretical breakthrough to the first functional installation. We've been improving the technology ever since. Chen stood and walked to a large window overlooking Earth. Admiral, your species has been spacefaring for over 2,000 years. In that time, your technology has advanced incrementally. You've had no real challenges, no pressure to innovate. She turned back to face him. We've been spacefaring for less than a century. But we've spent that entire time knowing that more advanced civilizations existed. We've been preparing for this exact scenario since our first contact with galactic civilization. General Morrison pulled up another display showing Earth's defensive installations. The Prometheus sites you encountered represent first-generation technology. We're currently testing 4th-generation systems that make today's demonstration look primitive. Dr. Vasquez nodded. We've also developed portable versions. Our newest starships carry gravitational manipulation systems. A single human frigate can now generate the same effects you witnessed today. Zephyx absorbed this information with growing dread. The humans weren't just defending their own world. They were preparing to project their power across the galaxy. His empire's age of expansion was over. What do you want from us? He asked finally. President Chun returned to her seat. Full military records of your empire. Star charts, fleet positions, resource allocation, command structure. Everything. That information could be used to attack our worlds. Yes, it could, Chen agreed calmly. But it won't be. We're not conquerors, Admiral. We're liberators. She activated a new display showing the current status of Kytherian territories. Many systems were highlighted in red, indicating unrest or rebellion. Your empire is already failing, General Morrison pointed out. The destroyed fleet represented 30% of your total military strength. Word of your defeat is spreading through the galaxy faster than you can return home. How long before your subjugated worlds realize they don't need to fear you anymore? Zephyx knew the human was right. The Kytherian Empire maintained control through fear and superior firepower. With their primary fleet destroyed and their military reputation shattered, rebellions would begin within months. We'll give you a choice, President Chen continued. Provide us with complete information about your empire's operations, and we'll help you manage a peaceful transition to a more democratic government. Refuse. and we'll simply arm your enemies and let events take their natural course. Captain Thorax spoke up. You're asking us to betray our own people. We're asking you to save them, Dr. Vasquez corrected. Your empire is going to collapse whether you cooperate or not. The question is whether that collapse will be managed or chaotic. Colonel Harrison, who had remained silent during the discussion, finally spoke. Admiral, I've studied the history of your conquests. Your forces have killed billions of innocent beings over the centuries. Your empire has caused immeasurable suffering. But we're still offering you a chance to end this peacefully. Zephyx looked around the room at the humans surrounding him. They weren't gloating over their victory or threatening him with torture. They were making a reasonable offer based on the new military reality. His empire was doomed either way, but cooperation might save millions of lives. If we provide this information, he said slowly, what guarantees do we have for the safety of Kytherian civilians? Full protection under galactic law, President Chen replied immediately. We have no interest in revenge or genocide. Our goal is to establish a stable, peaceful galactic order where all species can develop without fear of conquest. General Morrison leaned back in his chair. Admiral, in the next few years, we're going to revolutionize galactic civilization. Defensive technology will be freely available to any peaceful species. Aggressive empires will find themselves facing unified resistance wherever they go. The era of conquest through technological superiority is ending. Dr. Vasquez added, we're also prepared to share our medical and scientific advances with former enemy species. Your people could benefit tremendously from peaceful cooperation. Zephyx felt the weight of 8 centuries of imperial tradition pressing down on him. His ancestors had built their empire through strength and conquest. But those same ancestors had also valued honor and the welfare of their people above personal pride. I need to consult with my officers, he said finally. Of course, President Chen replied. Take all the time you need. Your ships aren't going anywhere until our gravitational fields allow it. As they were escorted to comfortable quarters to discuss their options, Zephyx reflected on the stunning reversal of fortune. 12 hours ago, he had commanded the most powerful fleet in Kytherian history. Now he was negotiating the terms of his empire's surrender to a species his people had dismissed as primitives. The humans had done more than defeat his fleet. They had fundamentally altered the balance of galactic power. Every peaceful species in the galaxy would soon have access to weapons that could stop any aggressor. The age of empire was ending, and the age of equality was about to begin. Whether his people would survive that transition depended entirely on the choices they made in the next few hours. Admiral Zephyx sat in his assigned quarters aboard the human orbital station, staring at a secure communication device the humans had provided. His senior officers gathered around him, their faces showing the exhaustion and uncertainty they all felt. Outside the viewports, the remains of their once mighty fleet drifted in pieces, held in place by gravitational fields that defied everything they thought they knew about physics. Admiral, Captain Thorax said quietly, I've been thinking about what the humans told us. If they can truly share this technology with other species, our empire won't last 6 months. Science Officer Graith tentacles writhed with agitation. The mathematics they showed us are impossible according to our understanding. But the evidence surrounds us. They've achieved something our greatest minds said could never exist. Communications Officer Vellner looked up from the human device. Sir, I've established contact with the homeworld. The Imperial Council is demanding an immediate status report. Zephyx took the communicator with trembling claws. In a few minutes, he would have to tell the most powerful leaders in the Kytherian Empire that their greatest fleet had been destroyed by a species they'd never considered a real threat. This is Admiral Zephyx reporting to the Imperial Council. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the semicircular chamber where 12 of the most powerful Kytherians in the galaxy sat in judgment. At the center, Emperor Valdris himself leaned forward, his ancient eyes sharp with intelligence and barely controlled fury. Admiral, the Emperor's voice carried clearly across the light years. Explain why your fleet's quantum signatures disappeared from our sensors 3 hours ago. Zephyx straightened despite his injuries. Your Imperial Majesty, the human homeworld was defended by technology beyond our understanding. Our fleet was destroyed by gravitational manipulation weapons that, Impossible, interrupted Grand Admiral Kyrek, the Empire's highest military commander. Gravitational manipulation on that scale requires power sources larger than most planets. Intelligence reports show the humans barely achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. Nevertheless, my lord, it happened. They demonstrated the ability to control space-time itself. Our ships were torn apart by forces no hull can withstand. Emperor Valdris studied Zephyx carefully. The old ruler had not maintained power for 3 centuries by ignoring uncomfortable truths. Show me. Zephyx activated his personal recorder, displaying the battle from the Dominion's edge's perspective. The Imperial Council watched in stunned silence as the mighty Kytherian fleet was scattered and destroyed by invisible forces emanating from Earth. When the recording ended, the chamber remained quiet for long moments. Finally, Science Advisor Nithek spoke. The energy readings are consistent with theoretical gravitational manipulation. But, the scale, it should be impossible for a single planet to generate such effects. Yet they did, Zephyx replied. Your Majesty, the humans claim this is only their first-generation technology. They're prepared to share these weapons with other species in the galaxy. Grand Admiral Kyrek's scales flushed with anger. A bluff. No species would arm their potential enemies. They would if they possessed overwhelming technological superiority, Emperor Valdris said thoughtfully. Admiral, what do the humans want? Zephyx explained the human demands. Complete military intelligence about the Empire in exchange for a peaceful transition to a democratic government. As he spoke, he watched the council members' expressions change from disbelief to anger to fear. They want us to surrender our entire civilization, growled War Minister Thexus. They're offering to save our entire civilization, Zephyx corrected. My lords, I've seen their capabilities firsthand. If they choose to act against us directly, we have no defense. Emperor Valdris was quiet for several minutes, clearly weighing options. Admiral, you believe these humans pose an existential threat to our empire? Yes, Your Majesty. Even if we mobilized every ship in our fleet, we could not overcome their defenses. And if they truly share this technology with other species, every world we've conquered will rebel, the Emperor finished. Our enemies will possess weapons we cannot match. Grand Admiral Kyrek leaned forward. Your Majesty, perhaps we should consider allying with other aggressive empires. The Nexari Dominion, the hegemony of Claw, they would face the same fate we did. Emperor Valdris interrupted. Admiral Zephyx, these humans destroyed our fleet in how long? Less than an hour, Your Majesty. The Emperor's expression grew thoughtful. A civilization that can achieve such technological advancement in mere decades is not one we can fight using traditional methods. On Earth, President Chun watched the Kytherian communication through quantum interceptors. Her science team had broken the alien encryption within minutes of detecting it, another demonstration of humanity's rapid technological progress. They're definitely taking this seriously, reported Intelligence Director Walsh. The Emperor seems to understand the implications better than his advisors. Dr. Vasquez studied the alien Emperor's biometric readings. He's intelligent and pragmatic. That's good for us. Intelligent beings can recognize when they've lost. General Morrison nodded toward the display showing other parts of the galaxy. What about the other empires? Are they responding to news of the Kytherian defeat? Mixed reactions, Walsh replied. Some are dismissing it as impossible. Others are quietly moving fleets away from human-claimed territory. The Nexari Dominion has requested a formal diplomatic meeting. President Chin smiled. Good. The faster word spreads, the less likely we are to face multiple invasions while we're distributing defensive technology. She turned to her science advisor. Dr. Vasquez, how soon can we have Prometheus installations operational on allied worlds? The first batch of portable systems will be ready in 6 weeks. We can have basic defensive capabilities installed on 20 worlds within 3 months. Make it 30 worlds, Chin ordered. I want to create an expanding zone of protected space as quickly as possible. Back on the orbital station, Admiral Zephyx had finished his report to the Imperial Council. The chamber fell silent again as the Emperor considered their options. Admiral, Emperor Valdris finally said, arrange a formal meeting with the human leadership. We will hear their terms in full. Grand Admiral Kyrek looked shocked. Your Majesty, you're considering surrender to a single planet. I'm considering survival for our people, the Emperor replied sharply. Admiral Zephyx, inform the humans that I will arrive personally within 10 standard days to negotiate. The communication ended, leaving Zephyx and his officers staring at the empty holographic projector. The Emperor was coming to Earth personally, something that hadn't happened in over 4 centuries. The implications were staggering. Captain Thorek broke the silence. Admiral, the Emperor understands what we're facing. But will the rest of the Empire accept his decision? They will if they want to survive, Zephyx replied. He activated the human communication system and requested another meeting with President Chen. Within an hour, they were back in the conference room where their fate had been discussed. President Chen listened carefully as Zephyx explained the Emperor's decision to come to Earth personally. That's unprecedented, General Morrison observed. Kytherian emperors never leave their home system. Emperor Valdris is pragmatic above all else, Zephyx explained. He recognizes that the old ways have failed. If he's coming here, he intends to make a deal. President Chen nodded. We'll be ready to receive him with full diplomatic honors. But, understand, Admiral, our terms won't change regardless of who delivers them. Dr. Vasquez pulled up a new display showing the current galactic situation. Admiral, you should know that 3 other aggressive empires have already requested meetings with us. Word of your defeat is spreading faster than we anticipated. The Nexary Dominion? Zephyx asked. Among others. It seems your empire's defeat has convinced several major powers to reconsider their expansion policies. Colonel Harrison leaned forward. Admiral, how do you think your people will react when they learn their emperor is negotiating surrender terms? Zephyx considered the question carefully. There will be resistance from military hardliners and the nobility. But most citizens have grown tired of constant warfare. If the emperor frames this as evolution rather than defeat. Evolution, President Chun repeated thoughtfully. That's actually a good way to describe what's happening. The galaxy is evolving beyond the age of conquest. General Morrison activated another display showing humanity's planned defensive network. In 18 months, we'll have Prometheus technology installed on over 200 worlds. Any aggressor will face immediate retaliation from multiple directions. What happens to empires that refuse to change? Zephyx asked. They'll find themselves increasingly isolated, Dr. Vasquez replied. Their neighbors will be protected, their enemies will be armed, and their own subjugated populations will have the means to rebel. President Chen stood and walked to the viewport showing Earth below. Admiral, humanity didn't choose to become a galactic power. We were forced into this role by civilizations like yours that see expansion as the only option. But now that we're here, we intend to create lasting peace. She turned back to face him. Your emperor is wise to come here personally. The decisions made in the next few weeks will determine whether the transition to this new galactic order is peaceful or chaotic. Zephyx felt the weight of history pressing down on him. His empire, 8 centuries old, was about to transform completely or face destruction. Everything his ancestors had built through conquest and domination was ending. But as he looked around the room at these humans, beings his people had dismissed as primitives, he realized that perhaps ending wasn't the right word. Perhaps evolution was better. President Chun, he said formally, I pledge my cooperation in facilitating these negotiations. My people deserve a chance to survive and grow in this new galaxy you're creating. Thank you, Admiral, Chun replied. And, I promise you, there will be a place for the Kytherian people in the civilization we're building. But it will be as equals, not conquerors. Outside the conference room, automated systems throughout Earth's orbital infrastructure worked around the clock to prepare for unprecedented diplomatic meetings. Representatives from dozens of species would soon arrive to witness the end of one age and the beginning of another. The Kytherian Empire had been the first to test humanity's resolve. Their decisive defeat would serve as both warning and invitation to every other civilization in the galaxy. Adapt to the new order or face the consequences of remaining in the old one. Admiral Zephyx returned to his quarters to prepare his own reports for the Emperor's arrival. As he wrote, he reflected on the strange turn his life had taken. He had come to Earth as a conqueror and would leave as a peacemaker, helping to build a galaxy where species could develop without fear. It wasn't the legacy he'd planned, but it might be a better one. Emperor Valdris stood on the command deck of his personal flagship, Eternal Dominion, watching Earth grow larger in the viewscreen. The blue world looked deceptively peaceful, giving no hint of the devastating power that had destroyed Admiral Zephix's fleet. Around his ship, a small escort of human vessels maintained perfect formation, not as guards, but as guides through the gravitational maze that still surrounded the human homeworld. The Emperor was an impressive figure even by Kytherian standards. Nearly 8 feet tall, his scales had turned silver with age, and ceremonial scars covered his arms, marks of battles fought in his youth when the Empire was still expanding rapidly. At over 400 years old, he had ruled longer than any Kytherian in history. "Your Imperial Majesty," said Fleet Admiral Corvex, his newest military commander. "Our sensors are detecting the same gravitational anomalies that destroyed Admiral Zephix's fleet. The humans could activate their weapons at any moment. They could have destroyed us the moment we entered this system," Valdris replied calmly. "The fact that they haven't suggests they're serious about negotiating." Through the viewscreen, he could see dozens of ships from various species orbiting Earth. Word of the Kytherian defeat had spread across the galaxy faster than anyone had anticipated. Representatives from over 30 civilizations had come to witness these unprecedented negotiations. Captain Nexar, his intelligence officer, approached with the latest reports. "Your Majesty, the Nexari Dominion fleet was turned away at the edge of human space yesterday. The humans told them diplomatic meetings only, no military demonstrations." "Wise of them," the Emperor mused. "The Nexari probably wanted to test human defenses for themselves. The hegemony of Claw has formally requested observer status for these negotiations," Nexar continued. "So have the Andromedan Republic, the Stellar Federation, and 12 smaller powers." Emperor Valdris nodded thoughtfully. Every major galactic civilization was suddenly interested in human diplomatic policies. The destruction of a Kytherian fleet had sent shockwaves through the established order that were still spreading. "Your Majesty," Fleet Admiral Corvex said carefully, "many of our allies are questioning your decision to come here personally. They see it as weakness." "Let them," Valdris replied. "Those same allies have contributed nothing to the Empire's growth in the past century. They've become comfortable with the status quo. I have not." A human voice crackled over the communications system. "Emperor Valdris, this is Admiral Chun of Earth Defense Command. You're cleared to dock with Station Unity. Transport ships are standing by to escort your delegation." "Thank you, Admiral Chun. We are honored by your hospitality." The docking process was remarkably smooth. Human technology guided the massive Kytherian flagship into a berth specifically constructed for this meeting. As the Emperor prepared to leave his ship, he reviewed the intelligence reports his spies had gathered about human civilization. What he found most disturbing wasn't their military capabilities, devastating as those were, but their social structure. Humanity had achieved technological marvels through cooperation between hundreds of separate nations. They had no emperor, no single ruler, yet they could coordinate planetary defense projects that spanned decades. Station Unity was a marvel of engineering, built specifically for diplomatic meetings between species with different environmental needs. The human delegation waited in a vast chamber with adjustable atmosphere and gravity. President Chen stood at the center, flanked by her top advisors and military commanders. "Emperor Valdris," President Chen said as he entered, "welcome to Earth." The Kytherian ruler studied the humans carefully. He had expected military officers and politicians, but several of the delegation appeared to be scientists and engineers. These people saw diplomacy as a technical problem to be solved, not a contest to be won. "President Chen," he replied formally, "I come seeking terms that will ensure the survival and prosperity of both our peoples." "I appreciate your directness, Your Majesty. Please, let's sit and discuss the future." The conference table was large enough to accommodate delegates from multiple species. Around the edges of the room, observers from dozens of civilizations watched through secure communication links. This meeting would determine the fate of galactic politics for generations to come. Dr. Vasquez activated a holographic display showing the current military situation. "Your Majesty, this represents the balance of power as it existed 1 month ago." The display showed the Kytherian Empire as the largest single entity, controlling over 300 systems. Other aggressive empires held similar territories, while peaceful civilizations huddled in small defensive alliances. Now observe, Dr. Vasquez said, changing the display parameters. The map transformed dramatically. Human influence expanded outward like a growing star, touching dozens of systems. Green zones indicating protected space multiplied rapidly, connecting previously isolated peaceful worlds. This represents our projected influence 6 months from now, she explained. Every green system will possess Prometheus defensive technology capable of destroying invasion fleets. Emperor Valdris studied the projection carefully. Your expansion rate is remarkable. How are you manufacturing these systems so quickly? General Morrison leaned forward. We're not manufacturing them, Your Majesty. We're teaching other species to build their own. The technology is freely shared with any civilization that commits to defensive use only. Freely shared. The Emperor couldn't hide his surprise. You're giving away military secrets to potential enemies? We're creating allies, President Chen corrected. Every species that receives Prometheus technology becomes invested in maintaining the new peaceful order. They have no incentive to attack neighbors who possess the same defenses. Fleet Admiral Corvex, who had accompanied the Emperor, spoke up. What prevents these armed worlds from forming aggressive alliances of their own? Dr. Vasquez smiled. The technology includes built-in limitations. Prometheus systems are purely defensive. They cannot be modified for offensive operations without triggering automatic shutdowns. She brought up technical specifications that made the Emperor's scientific advisors whisper in amazement. The humans had designed their weapons with philosophical constraints built into the fundamental physics. A society could defend itself completely, but could never use the same technology to attack others. Ingenious, admitted Imperial Science Advisor Grok. You've created weapons that make conquest impossible while preserving the right of self-defense. That was the goal, President Chen replied. We want to create a galaxy where civilizations can develop and grow without fear of invasion. Emperor Valdris was beginning to understand the scope of human ambitions. They weren't just defending Earth. They were reshaping galactic civilization itself. What role do you envision for existing empires in this new order? That depends on how willing you are to change, General Morrison answered. Empires that voluntarily transition to peaceful expansion will receive full technological and economic support. Those that continue aggressive policies will find themselves increasingly isolated. The Emperor activated his own display, showing the internal structure of the Kytherian Empire. President Chen, my empire controls over 300 worlds. Billions of beings depend on imperial infrastructure for basic survival. How do you propose we manage such a massive transition? Carefully and gradually, Dr. Vasquez replied. We've developed detailed transition protocols based on successful decolonization efforts from human history. The key is maintaining stability while transferring power to local governments. President Chen pulled up another projection. Your Majesty, we propose a 20-year timeline for full democratic transition. Imperial infrastructure remains intact, but shifts to a cooperative model. Individual worlds gain autonomy while maintaining beneficial trade relationships. What about our military? Fleet Admiral Corvex asked. The Imperial Navy employs millions of soldiers and officers, retrained as explorers, traders, and peacekeepers, General Morrison replied. The galaxy is vast, with thousands of unexplored systems. There will be no shortage of important work for experienced spacers. The Emperor considered these proposals while reviewing the intelligence reports streaming from across the galaxy. 3 more aggressive empires had already requested similar meetings. The Nexary Dominion was reportedly facing internal rebellions as word of human defensive technology spread to their conquered worlds. President Chen, he said finally, you're asking me to dismantle 8 centuries of imperial tradition. We're asking you to evolve beyond it, she replied. Your Majesty, the Kytherian people are remarkable engineers and explorers. Under the imperial system, those talents have been directed toward conquest. Imagine what they could achieve if directed toward creation instead. Dr. Vasquez brought up examples of rapid technological advancement achieved through international cooperation. Human civilization advanced faster in the past century than in the previous millennium, specifically because we learned to share knowledge instead of hoarding it. Your people could lead similar advancement across the galaxy, General Morrison added. Kytherian engineering expertise combined with freed resources from military expenditure could revolutionize space exploration and colonization. Emperor Valdris was quiet for several minutes, weighing centuries of tradition against the harsh realities of the new galactic order. Around the galaxy, his empire was already showing signs of strain. Conquered worlds were testing imperial resolve, and his own military commanders were questioning orders. What guarantees can you provide for Kytherian civilians during this transition? He asked. Full protection under galactic law, President Chen replied immediately. We'll also station human observers on any world that requests them to ensure peaceful transition procedures. And economic support? Comprehensive trade agreements, technology sharing, and infrastructure investment, Dr. Vasquez answered. Your Majesty, peaceful civilizations are far more profitable trading partners than conquered territories. Fleet Admiral Corvex leaned forward. What happens to imperial nobles who resist these changes? General Morrison's expression grew serious. Those who commit to peaceful transition will retain positions in the new democratic governments. Those who attempt to maintain power through violence will face justice under galactic war crimes tribunals. The implications were clear. The humans were offering generous terms for cooperation, but they were prepared to use force against those who refused to change. Emperor Valdris studied the faces around the table. These humans had demolished his empire's military power in a single afternoon, yet they were offering his people a chance to rebuild as equals rather than subjects. The choice was between evolution and extinction. President Chen, he said formally, I accept your terms in principle. The Kytherian Empire will begin immediate transition to a democratic confederation. A murmur ran through the observers around the chamber. The oldest and most powerful empire in the galaxy had just agreed to voluntary dissolution. However, the emperor continued, I will need guarantees that other empires cannot exploit our vulnerability during the transition period. You'll have them, Dr. Vasquez replied. The first Prometheus installations will be operational on your core worlds within 8 weeks. Any empire that attempts to invade former Kytherian territory will face the same fate as your fleet. President Chen stood and extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement. Your Majesty, you've made a wise choice. Your people will have a place of honor in the civilization we're building together. Emperor Valdris accepted the handshake, sealing an agreement that would reshape the galaxy. Around the chamber, representatives from dozens of species witnessed the end of the Imperial Age and the beginning of something entirely new. As news of the agreement spread across the galaxy, other empires faced the same choice the Kytherian Emperor had made. They could evolve with the changing times or face the consequences of clinging to an obsolete system. The humans had given them fair warning. Now it was time to choose. 6 months later, Admiral Zephyx stood on the observation deck of the newly renamed New Harmony, formerly the Kytherian dreadnought Eternal Conquest. Through the viewport, he watched human and Kytherian engineers working together to install Prometheus defensive systems on Kitharus Prime, the former imperial capital. The transformation had been remarkable. Where once massive military installations had dominated the planet's skyline, now research centers and manufacturing facilities rose toward the sky. The weapons foundries that had produced instruments of conquest for 8 centuries were being converted to build exploration vessels and peaceful infrastructure. Admiral, called out Captain Thorek, approaching with a data tablet. The latest reports from the outer systems are encouraging. Rebellion activity has dropped to nearly zero since the defensive installations came online. Zephyx nodded with satisfaction. The transition hadn't been entirely smooth. Several imperial governors had attempted to maintain control through force, but human intervention had been swift and decisive. Those who chose cooperation found themselves with enhanced autonomy and prosperity. Those who chose violence found their military assets mysteriously malfunctioning whenever they attempted aggressive action. Any word from the Nexary front? Zephyx asked. The Dominion's Third Fleet engaged human forces near Altara yesterday, Thorek replied. The battle lasted approximately 40 minutes. No human casualties reported. Zephyx wasn't surprised. 3 empires had refused the human offer of peaceful transition. The Nexari Dominion, the hegemony of Claw, and the Voraxi Imperium had all declared their intention to continue expansion policies regardless of human interference. Their defiance had been short-lived. The Nexari had lost 4 major fleets in 6 months. The hegemony of Claw had watched their home system's defenses crumble in minutes when they attacked a human-protected world. The Voraxi Imperium had simply ceased to exist after their emperor ordered a genocidal assault on a peaceful colony under Earth's protection. The humans are maintaining their promise, Thorek observed. They could have conquered half the galaxy by now, but they're limiting themselves to defensive actions. Defensive actions that happen to be overwhelmingly effective, Zephyx replied with dark humor. Through the communication system, a familiar voice requested permission to come aboard. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now serving as the Human Catherian Cooperation Coordinator, had become a regular visitor to former Imperial vessels. Dr. Zephyx greeted her as she entered the observation deck. Always a pleasure. How goes the great experiment? Dr. Vasquez smiled, pulling up a holographic display that showed the current galactic situation. Better than we dared hope. 17 empires have voluntarily transitioned to democratic governments. Over 400 worlds now possess Prometheus defensive systems. Aggressive incidents have dropped by 93%. The display showed the galaxy transformed. Where once territorial boundaries had been maintained through military threat, now cooperative zones extended across vast regions of space. Trade routes that had been disrupted by constant warfare were flourishing again. What about resistance? Thorek asked. Minimal and decreasing, Vasquez replied. The few remaining aggressive empires are finding themselves increasingly isolated. Their own populations are demanding the benefits that democratic worlds are receiving. She highlighted several systems on the display. The Nexari Dominion is facing internal rebellion on over 60% of their worlds. The hegemony of Claw lost their entire outer rim last month when those systems declared independence and requested human protection. Zephyx studied the data with fascination. They're collapsing from within. Exactly. That's the beauty of this approach. We don't need to conquer aggressive empires. We just need to show their people that better options exist. A priority communications signal interrupted their discussion. The transmission came from Earth itself, marked with presidential authorization codes. Admiral Zephyx, Dr. Vasquez, this is President Chun. We have a situation that requires your immediate attention. The holographic display shifted to show a massive fleet moving through space toward human-protected territory. The ships were unlike anything in the Galactic database, sleek, organic-looking vessels that seemed to bend light around themselves. The Zethkari Collective has emerged from the Galactic core, President Chen's voice continued. Our intelligence suggests they control over 2,000 systems and possess technology that rivals our own. Zephyx felt his blood chill. The Zethkari were legends from the early days of galactic civilization, an ancient empire that had withdrawn to the galaxy's center millennia ago. If they were returning now, with technology that could match human capabilities, they've already absorbed 3 former Nexari systems without any resistance from the population, Chen continued. Early reports suggest they're offering something we can't provide, direct neural integration with their technology. Dr. Vasquez was already analyzing the transmitted data. This could be a problem. Our defensive systems are designed to stop conventional military threats. If they have truly advanced biotechnology. Dr. Admiral, President Chen's voice carried new urgency. You're both needed on Earth immediately. We're calling an emergency session of the Galactic Cooperation Council. 3 days later, representatives from over 60 species gathered in the expanded diplomatic complex on Earth's orbital stations. The chamber buzzed with nervous energy as delegates discussed the implications of the Zethkari return. Emperor Valdris, now serving as the elected president of the Kytherian Confederation, sat beside President Chun at the central table. Around them, leaders who had once been bitter enemies worked together to address this new threat. The intelligence reports are disturbing, said Ambassador Krell of the former hegemony territories. The Zethkari aren't conquering worlds. They're transforming the populations themselves. Dr. Vasquez activated a holographic display showing the few available images from Zethkari-controlled space. They appear to be offering direct technological integration. Individuals can have their consciousness enhanced with artificial intelligence components, their bodies modified with biotechnological improvements. It's seductive, observed Nexari representative Thara, whose homeworld had recently voted to join the Galactic Cooperation Council. They're not offering conquest or subjugation. They're offering evolution. President Chen stood to address the assembly. The question we face is whether this represents a genuine advancement or a more subtle form of domination. Our preliminary analysis suggests that integration with Zethkari technology is irreversible. General Morrison activated tactical displays showing the Zethkari fleet movements. Their expansion pattern is unlike anything we've encountered. They're not targeting strategic systems or resource-rich worlds. They seem to be selecting populations based on genetic and cultural criteria we don't understand. Admiral Zefix raised his hand for recognition. President Chun, have you attempted direct communication with the collective? We've tried. Their responses are unusual. Chun activated an audio recording of alien voices speaking in perfect synchronization. The effect was deeply unsettling. Cooperation Council of Biological Entities, the collective voice said, your resistance to advancement is noted but irrelevant. Integration will proceed according to optimal parameters. Biological consciousness will be preserved and enhanced. Cultural distinctiveness will be maintained within acceptable variants. Questions regarding autonomy and individual choice are artifacts of pre-integration thinking patterns. Post-integration entities report satisfaction levels approaching theoretical maximums. Resistance is inefficient and ultimately futile. The chamber fell silent as the recording ended. The implications were chilling. The Zethkari apparently saw biological consciousness as something to be improved rather than preserved in its natural state. Emperor Valdris spoke carefully. They sound entirely convinced that they're helping these populations. That may be more dangerous than simple conquest. Dr. Vasquez nodded grimly. Our analysis suggests they genuinely believe integration improves quality of life. From their perspective, they're offering a gift that biological entities are too primitive to appreciate. Can Prometheus technology stop them? Asked the representative from Andromedan Republic. Unknown. General Morrison replied honestly. Our defensive systems are designed to counter conventional physics-based weapons. If they're using biotechnology that integrates with living organisms. President Chun returned to the podium. Which brings us to why we've called this emergency session. The Zethkari represent a challenge that no single species can face alone. We need coordinated research and development on a scale never before attempted. She activated a new display showing proposed research installations across dozens of worlds. Project Synthesis will combine the best scientific minds from every species in the Council. Our goal is to develop countermeasures for Zethkari integration technology while also exploring whether any form of beneficial cooperation is possible. Admiral Zefix studied the proposed timeline. You're talking about a research project spanning multiple decades. If necessary, Chen replied. But our preliminary analysis suggests the Zethkari expansion is methodical, not urgent. They seem to be taking their time to ensure each integration is perfect. Ambassador Krell leaned forward. What if some species want to join them voluntarily? Do we have the right to prevent their choice? The question hung in the air, touching on fundamental principles of the Galactic Cooperation Council. The alliance had been built on the principle of voluntary association and mutual respect for sovereignty. Emperor Valdris spoke slowly. If the choice is truly voluntary and reversible, then we must respect it. But if integration is irreversible, then we're talking about the permanent alteration of entire civilizations. Dr. Vasquez brought up brain scan data from former Zethkari territories. Early analysis suggests that integrated individuals retain their personalities and memories, but their decision-making processes are fundamentally altered. They become incapable of questioning the integration process. In effect, General Morrison added, they become perfectly happy slaves to a system they can no longer evaluate objectively. President Chen addressed the assembly directly. The Zethkari represent the ultimate test of our principles. We've spent months building a galactic civilization based on voluntary cooperation and individual freedom. Now we face an enemy that offers a form of happiness that eliminates the capacity for choice." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "We must decide. Are we willing to fight for the right to be imperfect, struggling, individual biological entities? Or will we accept that integration might represent genuine improvement?" The debate that followed would shape the future of galactic civilization. Species that had been enemies months earlier found themselves united in defending the chaotic, inefficient, beautiful diversity of biological consciousness against the perfect efficiency of the collective. Outside the chamber, automated systems worked around the clock to coordinate the largest research project in galactic history. Across hundreds of worlds, scientists and philosophers grappled with questions that challenged the very nature of consciousness and identity. The humans had successfully ended the age of conquest through superior military technology. Now they faced an even greater challenge, proving that freedom was worth preserving even when slavery offered genuine happiness. Admiral Zephyx returned to his ship with new purpose. The transformation of his empire from conquistador to guardian had been painful, but necessary. The coming struggle against the Zethkari would test whether the diverse, chaotic alliance they had built could survive against an enemy that offered perfection itself. As he watched the stars through his viewport, Zephyx reflected on how much had changed in just 1 year. A species his people had dismissed as primitives had revolutionized galactic civilization twice. First by ending the age of empire, and now by uniting former enemies against a threat to consciousness itself. The galaxy would never be the same. Whether that was evolution or destruction remained to be seen.